people only care about Bitcoin when the price is pumping, and that makes my job really tough, trying to educate people on Bitcoin and our monetary system. And to me, right, the least interesting thing about Bitcoin is its price denominated in US dollars, right? I don't necessarily care about measuring Bitcoin, right? A monetary system that's decentralized, permissionless, and has a fixed supply in a melting ice cube, right? The dollar is a measuring stick that's constantly shrinking. So to me, what's interesting about Bitcoin is the freedom and sovereignty that it can give individuals, being able to save in money that can't be printed out of thin air. And like the monetary history that's brought us to this place of a fiat monetary standard and the effect that fiat money has on society, right? Those are the things that are interesting to me about Bitcoin. So it feels like, Sisyphus rolling the boulder uphill, sometimes making Bitcoin videos, especially when the price action isn't interesting to people, which can be tough. And people try to understand Bitcoin through the framework of things that have already existed in the past. They try to compare it to stocks, other cryptocurrencies, gold, things like that, fiat. But Bitcoin is a completely new paradigm, and that's the case with any new, technology or invention, right? It's really hard to predict what the effects will be, and it's really ineffective to compare a new technology, a new paradigm to something that already exists. So it really is an uphill battle. Even though I think the number one problem holding back Bitcoin from being adopted truly from the ground up and like a grassroots movement is the gap of education, right? People still comparing Bitcoin and crypto, people just not understanding Bitcoin in general and the power it has to be money. So yeah, like I talk about all the time, conflating Bitcoin and crypto is one of the biggest problems that stifles Bitcoin adoption and Bitcoin understanding. And the fact is, it's great that all these, corporations and companies are adopting Bitcoin. And, that's the goal of like my career. I'd like to work on a team of Bitcoiners, but Bitcoin adoption truly happens from the ground up, right? It happens from individuals choosing to store their time and energy in an asset that can't be printed out of thin air, right? It's really that simple. And that's the way that adoption like this starts. So it's so important that we have more Bitcoin education, monetary education, but it feels like a losing battle sometimes, and that's what I'm struggling to, show up and do this every day, talk about Bitcoin and the transformative power I think it has, because, people aren't interested in it unless the price is going up. And, people view Bitcoin, I'm saying this all the time, but people view Bitcoin as a vehicle to use to acquire more dollars, when even just having that mindset is a fundamental misunderstanding of the fact that Bitcoin is money, right? Bitcoin isn't a vehicle to acquire more fiat, right? It's the exit from the fiat system that drains our life force by printing units out of thin air and creating debt to pay off debt, right? That's a system with a hidden tax. We're taxed on, everything, and then whatever we have left, we're taxed through printing money, devaluing the currency. And so, yeah, it feels tough. It's tough to feel like I'm talking into the void sometimes. Feels like people aren't necessarily interested. And, I just don't want right? Like, this is the most important time to build conviction, build understanding, build knowledge when the price is down, and each dollar goes further in terms of how many scarce units of Bitcoin you can acquire per dollar. But that's also when people aren't interested. So it's like such a weird situation to be in. And, I'm going to say the same things when Bitcoin is pumping. And, I start getting more texts and messages from people and like, what's happening with Bitcoin? Should I get in? Which always happens in the bull market, because that's when people start paying attention. But I'm going to have the same answer then, right? Like, should you buy Bitcoin? I don't know. Should you exchange units of economic measurement that are printed out of thin air for units of money that can't be debased? Like, I don't know. I don't know a bad time to do that. But the better time would have been, when I've been talking about it for months and months and months and, trying to educate people. That's when you should have, done the research on what this asset is. And if you borrow your conviction from someone else, then you're going to get liquidated out of the market. You're not going to hold on to that Bitcoin for the long term. But learning about it now, when no one's interested in it, right, that's when you have the most opportunity. And again, even when Bitcoin is pumping to the moon, right, it's still not necessarily going to be a bad idea to exchange fiat currency for Bitcoin, right? That's like just like such an interesting thought experiment, like once you start thinking about it that way. And I don't want people to say Bitcoiners are lucky, because we've stood through all of these bear markets, all these people calling us dumb or whatever, and not believing, not seeing the vision. So it'll be interesting. And yeah, I think that's about it for the video. Thanks everyone for the support. We just hit 1,500 subscribers. I'm on my journey to posting 100 days in a row on YouTube. So if you want to support that, leave a like, subscribe. I have a couple links down below for Bitcoin exchanges, things like that. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one. As always, together, let's work, save, and build a better future with Bitcoin.